In this video, I'm going to show you alternative keyboard shortcuts for MIDI in Reaper. Now, the purpose of this video is to use a MIDI controller to trigger actions in Reaper. And using alternative keyboard shortcuts, we can create multiple actions for different workflows, giving us more power with fewer controls on a MIDI controller. Let's take a look. I have a project set up here with a bunch of tracks already set up and a bunch of regions set up as well for different parts in our song. And I set up each track, if we right-click, to automatically record on when the track is selected. So if I choose a track, I can play that sound or record right away. Choose the bass or the piano or the synth or an arpeggiator. There's a quick way to work, as we can just switch on the fly to any track we want to work on or be in record to record into for each one of these regions or parts. But I want to use my MIDI controller right over here to control these different things, starting with the transport. As you can see over here, there's some transport buttons for play, record, and stop. So I'm going to start off by setting up those actions with those buttons. But before we get started, we need to go to the preferences. Control P on the PC, Command comma on the Mac. And we can go over here to MIDI devices and find the device we're using. I'm using this one, and make sure we turn on Control for this device. In addition to Input for MIDI, we need to turn on Control to trigger actions in Reaper. So now we can just set up actions with the action list. Go up here to Actions, Show Action List, and type into the filter Transport Play. And right over here is an action to put our transport in play. Go to Add, hit that button on a MIDI controller, and it shows up right here. Now obviously, you might be using a different controller. I'm using the Arturia MIDI Lab 3, but it's going to work the same with any controller you're using, with buttons, faders, or knobs. So now, this button is going to trigger play in Reaper. And let's do the same for stop. Right over here, hit that button, and another one for record, right over here. So now, if I hit the play button, Reaper starts playing. Hit the stop button, it stops. Hit the record button, and then it goes into record. So our transport is working. If you have other transport buttons on your controller for rewind and fast forward, you can set up those as well. We're just going to set up these three. So now I want to set up using one of my knobs to choose these tracks. So instead of clicking on each one, using a keyboard shortcut to go up and down, we could use a MIDI controller knob. I'm going to use this one. Go back to our actions, type in, go to track, and there's an action right here to go to our track using MIDI continuous controller information. Hit add, turn that knob, and it shows up right here. Now we could leave it in absolute mode, but I've found for me, in this controller, it works better with this option. So if you're not getting the best response, try out these other options. I'm going to choose this one, hit OK, and now if I move that knob, it scrolls through the tracks. I want to go to my bass, or my piano, or my synth, and so on. So it's a bit quicker to use this knob to get to the track I want to work on. Now let's set up the other knobs for track volume. Type into the filter, set track volume, and choose these actions over here for setting the track volume. Hit add, move the first knob or fader on your controller. I'm going to use this one, and it shows up right here. And I'm going to switch this back to absolute mode, as it works better for my controller. And I'm also going to choose to automatically close window on the MIDI input. This will make this a bit quicker. As we can scroll to track 2, hit add, and touch knob 2, and it adds that as our trigger, but also closes the dialog. Do the same for 3, and so on. So now they're all done. If we go to our mixer, bring down the knobs, we can remix this project. Just using the knobs or faders on our controller. So that's the basic setup I want to use for this controller. But I also want to use these pads for other functions as well. That's where alternative keyboard shortcuts and Reaper 7 come in. But before we do that, because of the length of this video, I've cut it into 2 parts. Check out part 2 of alternative keyboard shortcuts for MIDI next. So that's pretty much it. That's alternative keyboard shortcuts for MIDI in Reaper. I hope you learned something, hope you could use it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.
Bingo, boys, let's go.